This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. If you're interested in these products, check the links in the description.
In this video, we are going to be talking about how to use rolled fondant to cover your cakes, or in this case, a fake cake. So typically, if you're going to be covering an actual cake, you want to have it crumb coated and have a nice, smooth, thin layer of buttercream on the outside for your fondant to adhere to. Since we're using a styrofoam dummy, I'm actually just going to use a little bit of piping gel. Depending on your purpose, you could use a little bit of buttercream. Those won't last too long though, because if they sit out for a while, they will start to smell. Or you can also use royal icing. You just want something to allow that fondant to stick to the surface of the styrofoam. I've already pre-kneaded this fondant, so it's nice and pliable, and it'll be easy to roll out. The first thing when you're rolling cakes is you want to make sure that you're measuring the sides of your cake. I know this is 6 inches at top, and because I bought these dummies, I also know that they're 4 inches high, meaning that I need a 14-inch diameter on my piece of rolled fondant in order to cover this whole cake. If you're icing cakes at home, the height is going to vary, although your width won't, because you know what size pan you've used. So you always want to make sure you're measuring those sides, adding up 2 times the sides and 1 across the top to make sure that you can cover the whole thing. There's nothing more terrifying than going to put your fondant on your cake and realizing that it's actually too small, because then you're going to have to patch things, or you have to peel it off and potentially start all over with a new piece of fondant. So always take that measurement ahead of time and know your diameter before you get started. I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of white vegetable shortening just to grease my area. I want to make sure that my fondant is rolling out, not sticking to the surface, right? Not sticking to the rolling pin either. And it doesn't take much. You don't want it to be too greasy. You just want it to be enough that things aren't sticking. I'm going to use my fondant rolling pin and some little 1/4 inch guides just to help things along. And I'm just going to roll this the way I would pie dough. Get it going, give it a little turn, extend the other direction. This will help you keep a nice round shape, right? Because we're rolling in all different directions. And it will help ensure that it's not sticking, because you're constantly checking by moving it, right? And once you get a little larger, it may be a little harder to pick up and move it, but that's okay, right? If you work on a table where you can go at it from all angles, as long as it's not sticking in the middle, you don't have to worry about lifting it and moving it. For the sake of today, for this tutorial, it's easier for me to move it so I'm not blocking the shot, right? So just keep extending it in all directions. So nice, firm, even pressure. And you can see we're getting a nice roll. If as you're rolling, if you see any air bubbles, use a nice fine point pen. You can just give them a little poke, and that'll let the air come out. And since you're rolling on top of it, you'll just close those little pinholes. And we just want to make sure we're keeping as round and circular a shape as possible, so that when we cover, we don't have a lot of excess in one area and maybe end up too short in another. And when you start getting to the point that you are almost the size you need to be, you can always use your ruler to check. We're almost there. And this is one of those things where slow and steady kind of wins the race. You want to make sure that you're getting a nice even roll, and you don't want to be too thin. And I like to start with my 1/4 inch guides and then extend it just a little thinner. And I find if I've gone down to that width and I'm nice and even, then just making it just a touch thinner, so I just have a nice thin layer of fondant on the outside. It allows me to cover it really easily and also get a nice thin smooth surface. Beautiful. So we're doing good on that width all the way around. I'm just going to give this a little cover. I want to make sure especially the center doesn't dry out while I'm working. You can always give it a nice little grease of shortening if you're going to take a few minutes. And I am going to take just a tiny bit of my piping gel and put it on top in the center of my styrofoam and just a little bit on the edges on the bottom. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of this, and I just want to make sure that I've got a nice layer on top so that it'll stick to the top, right? So you can see there's a nice little layer of that clear gel there and a nice little bit around the bottom. And that'll ensure that my fondant sticks without things becoming too messy. Right, so just a little bit all the way around. I will give my fingers a quick clean, and then I'm going to use my rolling pin to drape my fondant over. And I find it easier, especially with small areas, right, as long as you're not sticking, to just simply go like this. And then it allows you to just line the bottom up and gently roll across the top. And you can see that gives you a nice even application, and we are ready to start smoothing. So just in case you got a lot of shortening on there, give it a little dust of powdered sugar. That'll allow your hands and your tools to move softly, smoothly, and swiftly without sticking across the top. And you want to give the top a nice quick smooth with your fondant smoother, and just go ahead and just gently press, right, the fondant down over the edges of those sides. Doing that quickly will ensure that it doesn't crack, right? And then we just want to work our way down, right? And you can see it's getting that kind of skirt ruffle look. That's going to happen, right? And just work down the sides with your hands or a fondant smoother, going as quickly as you can. It'll go a little slower at first, right? And just kind of release that pressure as you're going. And you can also use a knife to trim up any excess fondant. So you can see over on the other side, I've got it all the way down, right? Anywhere it's kind of starting to ruffle, you just want to kind of gently pull that out as you press down. And that'll make sure that the ruffles really happen at the bottom, right? And can easily be trimmed off. And trimming some of the kind of really extreme excess as you go will allow you to kind of help release some of that pressure and more easily push that fondant against the side without getting any creases or wrinkles, right, towards the bottom of your cake, right? Because it makes for less to deal with. The ruffling will be kind of like less extreme, less dramatic, right? So just kind of keep working, keep going all the way around until you have it pushed against the sides of the cake all the way around, and trim off your excess. So I've continued to press this against the sides and use my fondant smoother to smooth it and press it against the sides, and also my little paring knife to trim off some excess. I still have a little bit of excess down there, so I'm gonna go ahead and lift my little cake, right? And I'm gonna put it up on a cake pan that's just slightly smaller than it is. And this will allow you to get it more towards eye level. I definitely recommend sitting for this portion, right? And kind of getting it as close to eye level as possible, and either just gently using your fingers or your fondant smoothers. I like one on top, one on the sides, to just kind of press that down so that it's flat and kind of flush against the sides. We're then going to use our small paring knife, just holding it nice and level, just to trim off that excess material and give us a nice flush finish with the base of our cake, or in this case, our fake styrofoam cake. Right? And if you use the one smoother on top and the other on the sides, it'll keep you from getting fingerprints in your cake. And you just want to use just light pressure all the way around, right? So I just want to gently find, right, the bottom of that cake, and you can use your fondant smoother on top, right? And just as you go, as you get little hanging pieces, just make sure you trim them off. You don't want too much weight. It can pull, right? Causing the fondant to sag, tear, right? We just want to go nice and flush so we have a nice, beautiful finish to the bottom of our cake, and that'll allow you to kind of stack them cleanly on top of each other without doing any kind of border, right? And without needing to do any patching or repairing. So I just try to work as quickly as possible anytime I'm working with fondant, just because it will start to crust over a little bit on the outside, dry, which will make your work not as clean, right? So you just want to go as quickly as you can, kind of without hurrying. Right? So there we have a beautiful flush finish on the bottom of our cake. We have nice smooth fondant on the sides without cracks, air pockets, or any little spaces. It's ready to put on a cake board, or if I'm going to cover more layers to stack together to make a beautiful fake display cake, I've taken all my trim and just re-kneaded it together and covered it with plastic wrap while I'm working, and I can use it to make then appliques, knead back into the rest of my fondant, used to cover another layer. Anything that had any actual piping gel, or in the case of covering a real cake, any buttercream on it, that I'm discarding, right? You don't want to mix that back in. It'll mix in color, food particles, other stuff that can contaminate your fondant. So now we have a nicely covered cake that's ready to turn into a beautiful design.
If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecorating.school.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.